the Grey Hat Beard podcast. Hello and welcome to show 54, part 2 of Grey Hat Beard Princess, the modern workplace podcast where we talk about all things Microsoft 365. If you haven't listened to part 1, go back and listen. We chat about all sorts of things about teams and how search is getting better. We talked about management in an age of hybrid work and some great tips from books. We may have talked a little bit about service accounts again, but it's good news this time. So go back and give that a listen as well. There might be opinions in there somewhere. In this part, though, we're going to be talking about the future of work, and we're joined again by Zoe Wilson, who has been doing a bit of digging into the future of work. So, Zoe, tell us what you've been up to.
Sure. So the Work Trend Index, something that's come out over the last couple of years, and as part of the Work Lab site, I actually love all of the research that comes out from there. I love the stats that come out of a Work Trend Index, and I actually use them really heavily when I talk to customers in my community presentations. But one of the things that has always struck me when I'm using these stats around, how stressed people feel or how well people are adopting technology or whatever the statistic is, does the pool of people who were contacted for this research actually look like the people that I'm talking to? Is it representative, or was this done on loads of people in Microsoft in America, or maybe Microsoft in America and a couple of other countries, and actually they look nothing like typical users from the UK or from the public sector, which is where we work with. So it was something I've been talking to our marketing about for a little while, because what I really wanted to do was to actually understand whether these trends were true for the people that we work with or for. And in some cases, maybe actually the way they were working was better. I think we work with UK public sector. It's very purpose-led, purpose-driven. A lot of people who work in public sector get rubbish paid. Let's be honest. So actually, they're probably motivated by slightly different things than people who work at tech companies, for example. But actually, I was really, really interested to understand whether the trends that we were seeing at a global level, or through some of the big tech companies, were actually relevant or right. Now we've got the research back, and there's some really interesting stuff in there. We're working on a white paper at the moment, so I can't give too much away. But what I did want to do was just talk, I think, through some of the high level trends and themes that we've seen. And I'm coming probably more from a tech perspective, actually, because I think that's a bit more relevant, although there were some really useful business insights that we got out of this as well. So one of the things that I thought was really interesting was that despite senior leaders predicting this shift to a future of hybrid working, actually, there was a minority of people who'd adopted this when you get down to just kind of regular workers. So actually, you've got senior managers who say, yes, we're going to go do hybrid working. And then, the people who are actually doing their jobs, what you've got is most people still working fully from home. And then a smaller number, but still a fairly decent number, who are actually working fully in the office, or, there might be frontline workers or something like that. They can't do their job from home. And I thought that was a really, really interesting trend, and that question of hybrid work is just really fascinating anyway, I think, because I don't think a lot of people have their head around that properly.
I completely agree with you on that, and it's really interesting, because for public sector, as you say, there are a lot of people, and we in IT who are information workers with a laptop, we tend to forget about these people. They have to be in a location to do their jobs, or they're out and about all the time. And, that's the way they have always worked, and they don't need to actually change. They get their job done, and they, as you say, they may be far more passionate about carrying out the job rather than trying to learn new technology or new ways of working. And those people tend not to actually go, oh, well, I'm suddenly going to change how I work because I can. It's more, well, actually, I'm already doing the best job I can, so therefore I'm going to carry on doing it the way it's always worked for me.
Yeah.
So change is hard for everyone. It is for me, I feel like it's more like a muscle that you could train. So if you constantly expose yourself to to change. It gets easier over time, but it requires to do a lot of internal work on yourself, because change fatigue is a thing as well. And for me, it's just like, so we have two different operation systems for ourselves. So it's running your business, and even if you are not a business owner or something, but it's just like operating, just like doing the things that are required so that you do not get just like into trouble with your manager. So it's running that business, and every change means changing your business. And yes, of course, if done right, and if this is beneficial, then this is beneficial in the long term. But it is an investment, and people who can't just like do investments because they want to have this return on investment before they do the investment, so which can't happen in just like this then this will be just like difficult for them to see the value in that, and then the energy that it takes just like to do these tasks and just like to change behavior and to think differently about the stuff that you were at ease with, just like not saying that it was easy, but that you could handle, and then putting yourself into a position where you do not feel like that anymore, or you struggle, or you can't find things, where you don't know which button to click, where you don't know which device to use, where you do not know best practices. So where you do not already know the workarounds for the things that you couldn't figure out. This is just it's energy draining for them, and all that energy then can't go into operating anymore. So which means that they are highly exposed to stress, while the quality of their work is lower than it used to be, which means that they feel uncomfortable with that. And then if you can't think long term, and people are different, not everyone is used to that, you just like struggle even more. So the more the bigger the step is, so the bigger the change is, the more we need to communicate. So what is in it for you? So what should you do? So what is beneficial for you? Because we always want to know this. And but if the change is huge and the benefit is small, we will not do this at all, because
I think that's really interesting when you come to this. When you come to the hybrids, because I think people have seen the benefit from working at home, which is probably why that you've got that large number of people staying at home. They're enjoying that. They're able to be productive. They're able to have closer links to their family time. Those are seeing the benefit, want to go back to the office. They liked that way of working. They want to get back to that. I guess what's interesting is, what's the benefit of the hybrid to people? Well, are they not seeing enough of that? That's interesting.
I think we're doing it wrong though. I think there's like, oh, I'm in the office 2 days, I'm at home 3 days, I'm working hybrid. It's like, no, we've got this opportunity to reimagine what the office looks like. Yeah. There's no longer a need for banks and banks of desks and for people to go and spend the whole day on calls or doing productive work when they could do that just as effectively at home. So what are you going to the office for? You need to be intentional about it. You need to, it's coming back to the point around connection. It needs to be for a purpose. And this is the bit that organizations just haven't got their heads around yet. And you need to set people up for things like hybrid meetings with the right equipment, because since people started going back to the office, I'm not going to lie, I have seen an absolute ton of horrendous meetings where people in the office I did have to think about that. I've seen loads of meetings where people in the office, like they just forget how to actually have a meeting with someone else in the same meeting in the room next to them. Echoes, the wrong mic's unmuted, I can't see the screen, I don't know what's going on,
chatting in the background. Yeah.
But I think you're absolutely right, Zoe, and I'm seeing exactly the same thing. Speaking to organizations, it's like, well, so some of them are wondering, well, how do we make the most of the space that we've got, the physical space? How do we entice people back into the office? Because nobody's doing it by choice, and it is that personal choice. Some people will be young, early in career, they're sat in their 1-bedroom flat going, I just got to get out of here. Others, will be more affluent. They will have invested and probably posted pictures on LinkedIn and Twitter of their wonderful setup and their super expensive screens.
Flashing signs.
Why would they go back into the office to just have one screen? And you get these different perspectives. Individuals are all thinking about it in different ways. And if you're going to go back into the office, I mean, at Microsoft, where I work in just west of London, teams go into the office, not individuals. Teams go in to socialize and to work together, not just individuals going in, because otherwise they're sat in an empty sea of hot desks, and there's no point going in for that. We all want to go in for a purpose, to meet people, to have a meeting. And a hybrid meeting isn't necessarily, oh, I'm at home and somebody's in the office. This is a hybrid meeting. We're all remote. So to a certain extent, we've all set something up in each space that we're in. So we have the kit to make this, we're able to do this. But equally, it could be between two meeting rooms in different locations.
It's irrelevant, isn't it?
Yeah. And I feel like, so if we take this one step further, not only intentional, so yes, I do want to accomplish the following things, but just like more think about, okay, so which different work situations could I find myself in? Just like, do I want to think about stuff? So do I need to just like have an inspiring environment where I can just like let my mind flow and just like figure out ideas? And maybe for me, a park is a good idea to do this. So maybe if the weather is nice, yes. Maybe I will sit in a museum where it's just like totally quiet and they have free Wi-Fi and do exactly. Perhaps I would do exactly that. Maybe I need to collaborate with people.
Yeah.
Maybe it is just like brainstorming together. Then it could be a nice idea to just like meet, but we do not need to meet for an entire day, just like get the most out of that office day. No, just like, so if it's beneficial for 2 hours,
you get kicked out of museums like that though.
Well, I mean, but the other thing is, when you say the purpose, it's how many times have you organized a call and you're going to share content and then somebody goes, right, so I'm in the car at the moment, and you're like, right, okay, well, wait a second, I obviously haven't set this meeting up properly because I haven't set expectation that you need to be able to consume content on a screen. Whereas if it's a one-to-one with my manager, I might go walk in the park. I don't necessarily need to do anything. And that purpose is really important for any, gathering, meeting, meeting is an overused word now as well anyway. It's just because we have to schedule it doesn't mean it's a meeting, does it?
Yeah. So coming back to the point around creativity, now this isn't something that's come out of the research, but this is something I've been thinking about a lot more recently. If you think about productivity, and this is a trap I've fallen in. I've given talks through the last 2 years on how to be more productive. I think we've fallen into this trap of confusing it with efficiency. So I can work at home and I can be more efficient. I can get more tasks done. I can tick off more things off my to-do list. But if you think about productivity, I mean, if you think about the productivity of a country or the productivity of an organization, there's an output. And for you to kind of innovate and take that leap forward, what you need to do is not just increase that output a little bit, but what you need is the innovation that is going to give you a step change. So, the new app idea, the new product, the new service, there's something that you need to come up with that's going to put you in front of your competitors, that's going to help you move the dial forward and increase your productivity without just relying on getting more people. And I think that what we've done over the last 2 years is we've fallen into this productivity trap where we think that because we're at home and we're sitting and we can join more calls and we can tick more things off our to-do list, that actually we're being more productive. And I think that if we're not intentional about this and we don't think about how we're going to innovate and be creative and bring people together to spark ideas, we'll actually miss some of those big leaps forward that we need to make as a society.
And you've got to remember that actually a lot of organizations don't look at it in terms of productivity. They look at it in terms of activity, which is a very, very different measure. Oh, well, I could be very busy, but I'm not actually being productive and I'm not being creative.
I think it's interesting because you'd said about not being productive, about ticking things off the to-do list. I mean, to me, that's that is one of the definitions of being productive, because you're getting things done. It doesn't matter how long you. So I think, to Al, your point of spending time doing things, if I block that time out on my meeting, I'm being in my calendar to do things, I'm being productive. No, you actually need to get outputs on this.
Are you doing the right thing?
But I think.
Yeah.
And I think that's the interesting. So you may be productive, but you may not be going in the right direction. You're not sharing it. It's almost this back. This is why a lot of people talk about SharePoint, the Microsoft 365 world. It's collaboration and productivity. Those two things go together. You need to work together. Productive, you can get stuff done. Collaboration, you can work together to come up with ideas, and it's that combination of both, I think. And there's probably a third pillar of innovation that needs to go in there. It's about applying those ideas to new things and new ways to it as well. It's almost those three triangle together, isn't it?
And it's that innovation, that serendipitous innovation, that is so hard, that everybody's trying to get to. The design, I can't remember which organizer, I think it was Bell Labs in the States, when in the 60s they designed a research lab, and it was all stretched along one corridor, so that you had to pass each other in the corridor. So everybody was passing each other all the time. So that was where they actually had those ad hoc conversations, and it's things like that designing the processes and the places to actually, nurture that creativity, nurture those meetings that you're going to have by just passing people. That's actually really important as well.
Yeah, and then
it's
creating a culture.
all three, isn't it?
Yeah, you want a culture as well where people can have ideas and they can speak up, and that is open to new ways of doing things.
And they can experiment.
Meet people that you usually don't meet.
Yeah.
Surround yourself with people outside of your filter bubble. Be the one that is the stranger.
That's Yammer, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Well, I think I need a drink.
See, this is why you need in-person meetings, so you can throw things at people when they say bits like that as well. You just can't do it so well virtually.
So is it still the year of Yammer?
It's
because 2020, this year, that was the year of Yammer. And as for me, it's still 2020 because we're just like in an endless loop.
But it is that, isn't it? It is the ability to meet people and see people and converse with people and be introduced to people that you wouldn't normally actually come across.
Yes, and that's great.
Yeah, coffee shops are very important.
Coffee is very important.
What else came from the study? Zoe, were there other areas?
So another one to call out was on Viva specifically. So it was really interesting when we got the feedback from the interviews, which we did with senior leaders. I was actually impressed that Viva featured so heavily when they were talking about tools. So Microsoft Teams, understandably, was seen as the hero product of the last couple of years. But I was really surprised and pleased by how many people talked about Viva, and they were using it in the context of, it helps us manage our tasks, it helps us manage our well-being, it's great. We think this is going to change how the organization works. And then when we got the view from the from the rank and file of the organization, less than 9% of them were using it.
That's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah,
was that licensed users? So had they invested licenses or using the sort of standard, like the Viva Insights standard and that kind of thing?
I think this was a seeded version. So, even the free personal insights that people could use with their standard licensing, less than 10% of general users were even aware of that it existed or actually using it, despite the fact that senior managers were.
That's an interesting discrepancy, isn't it? I mean, because I think one of the things in the Work Trend Index was the separation between the perception of leadership and the perception of employees, and there was a divergence in terms of how aligned their views were, and that seems to back that up as well. Leaders have one view and everybody else has a completely different view.
Yeah, and that was what I wanted it for, to be honest. This is what I wanted to find was, where are these points where actually there is a difference of opinion, or where are the kind of challenges or the opportunities. It was super interesting. 9%.
Did you get to the point of understanding, was it because you mentioned there that people didn't know it was there or they weren't using it? Were you able to kind of distinguish between those at all?
Yes,
Because I think there's a certain amount that that possibly with Viva, maybe start using the virtual commute and then let it fade off. Maybe don't do it for a couple of days, and then those days takes a bit longer, and you suddenly realise you haven't done it for ages, and that 10-minute headspace is a bit too long and unrealistic, and it gradually tails off in usage.
See, I think it's interesting because I think it sets a good precedent for people, but they might actually turn to other things that are more, I'm going to go for a walk instead, and it could start to just plant the seed of, this is what I'm going to do. But I think the other thing that a lot of people think of as Viva is the emails. And if those aren't necessarily switched on for everyone, or people have just kind of gone, yeah, I'm not interested in that, I'm just going to unsubscribe, then they will have just forgotten it's there. Whereas leaders may have been more, it may have been highlighted to them more often. That some
less
of those
organised,
tools are
and
there.
therefore they're more useful.
Yeah, especially in IT, because
depends on the role.
If you work in IT leadership, you've got people like me coming and saying, "Hey, did you know about this thing?"
Yeah.
And if they're not actually disseminating that information, so as an individual, I can start using it, but it doesn't mean I've told anybody in my organisation about it or have a plan for how it's going to be adopted.
Yeah, no, that is quite interesting, because if there is that discrepancy, then and it's on that one usage of one technology, then what is it for everything else?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and it is interesting, like some of the language and so even just the kind of the hybrid working, some of the language and the ways that I think people understood these questions from the answers that we've got isn't what I'd necessarily think it was either. So I think, people think that they're like expert Teams users because they're chatting and joining a few meetings and don't actually realize
there's everything else. But this is it. This is where the happy hour etiquette and all of those little tips and tricks are so valuable, because I've done those sessions, and I always like to try and show at least one thing where people are going to go, oh wow, that's just going to change my life tomorrow. And there's always one thing that you can show somebody, and it's amazing how much people don't know. And I think this is where it comes back to what you were saying, Louise, about change and big changes, morphing into continuous change, continuous innovation, continuous improvement. It starts to build on that maturity of how you're using the tools, and then it starts to, all the little tips and tricks start to sort of filter down. And people start to go, oh, actually, this does make my life easier. This does make me more productive.
It's also reminding you what's there as well. There's often times you've started using something, you've fallen out. I know we've talked on the show about habits and rituals before, but that kind of habit that you gradually lose out of, and then you forget about it. And someone does a session, they mention that, it's like, yes, I need to do that more often because it does help me. And you just need that nudge every now and then just to get you back into the right way of working.
But what's in it for me when you launch a change is usually related to that particular change. Once that change is actually bedded in and people are comfortable with it, that's the time when you can reinforce the what's in it for me, but also expand and go, oh, damn, there's this new feature, and now there's Headspace, and now there's the virtual commute, and there's Fine Time, and there's scheduling, all of these lovely little tools that people tend not to use for that initial change when they first move to the cloud, first move to a new technology.
Interesting. So Zoe, did you ask people about sort of adoption and change? Did they have programs going on to try and encourage people? Was there any?
So I'd have to look back through the actual raw data for that one, for the questions. There were questions around how the technology they needed to work from home was landed when they first went to work from home, and I think it was overwhelmingly positive actually that everything just worked. They've all obviously forgotten about Teams creaking for the first 2 months. I haven't, but they obviously they've probably just got rose tinted glasses looking back like, oh yeah, we could work from home, it was great. But I don't think we asked about change adoption specifically.
Did you find out anything about whether people are moving roles to work in teams that are working in different ways? So like where you might have two teams doing the same thing, but one might be more office focused and one might be more remote focused.
No, so we did that. That's quite an interesting angle. We did ask about the Great Resignation and the purpose fit people feel for work, and whether people thought they'd still be in the same role in, I don't know, a year, 2 year, 3 years time. And that was really interesting because I think the Great Resignation, the number that keeps being touted is like 43. Is it 43%? I think of people are going to have a new job within a year, and it was significantly less for this. There were comments around
that's because it's public sector though. There's
people feel what they're doing is matters. Yeah.
And when did you do this? Because I've seen a lot of organisations suddenly thinking people are less likely to change now because of uncertainties around cost and inflation.
About 2 months ago.
2 months ago. Okay.
Yeah. So and it was interesting because out of the respondents who felt they worked at an organisation that was innovative, the percentage that was likely to leave was even lower, I think, which demonstrates how much value they place on working at what they deem to be an innovative organisation. This is one of the phrases I have a little bit of issue though, because what they deem an innovative organisation is probably someone who helps roll teams out quickly at the start of the pandemic and they can work from home if they want to, whereas I'm not sure that's what I'd consider innovative.
It's all relative, isn't it?
Yeah
Totally.
We want an innovative organisation that doesn't change at all. That's often the kind of public sector view of things, isn't it?
And so the last kind of theme that I'd pull out was around that personal well-being, and there was quite a strong theme through a large number of the respondents around the well-being, both at a senior level and at a more junior level. And I think the thing that I thought was positive with that was that a large number of them thought that technology could help. So even if they didn't know about Beaver and they weren't using it, they still believed that there was some tech that could help.
That's interesting, isn't it? It's a social dependency on technology can solve everything. Even if we don't know how it's going to quite do it, that's something that people do tend to think, oh, well, AI, I mean, that's the savior for everything now, isn't it?
Well, no.
No.
Yeah, it turns out AI is only as good as you feed it.
Yeah.
Like
most things,
people thinking that, I think is what Al meant there. But yeah,
I think
I agree with both on that one.
That kind of correlate, because there was an article on WorkLab around what people want in a job right now, and that kind of had the same sort of findings in terms of positivity, a focus on well-being, sense of purpose, and you kind of think, it's probably common sense, but it's always nice to know that there is actually stats to back it up, and it's not sort of anecdotal on our network of people that we know, and it's slightly wider than just us.
I think the other thing I like as well is so these are things that they're not new. Yeah, if you'd have gone back 10 years and someone said, do you want a job that looks like this? We'd have all said, yeah, that sounds fantastic.
That sounds perfect.
Yeah, and for the first time, I think we're in a position where the candidates actually have the power to say, actually, this is what I want, and I know I can get it. So if you're not willing to give me it, I'm just going to go somewhere else that will give me work on my terms.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting because going back to the resignation, you think within public sector, certainly in looking kind of councils and things, for a lot of people there's less options for jobs because you've got your local council, that's going to be the one you're working at. So to be able to work somewhere else, you've almost got to move or have a long commute. That you would have thought that the kind of virtual move opens up a lot more options of that, and that you would see that resignation. So it's even more interesting to see that there isn't so much that people are sticking and holding with organisations.
So I've seen a lot of local government be quite keen that people are in the area that they're governing, and having people resident in the town or borough, or at least present in the borough or the town, rather than being remote. And I think that's an interesting conundrum, because that changes the mindset quite a lot for a lot of local government. Oh, well, they live 100 miles away, they've never actually been to the area that we're looking after, because it's very much local pride.
Yeah, so I think I do see some of that, but I do so this isn't from the research, this is more anecdotally, but I do see that changing a little bit as well, because what you've got with not everywhere, but what you've got with some of the kind of remote council, countryside councils or other public sector organisations is no talent pool.
Yeah,
they've got nobody who, particularly if you look at kind of some of the, the more modern work type jobs, the kind of tech ones and things like that, they don't have the talent pool. So suddenly, by going further afield and being willing to offer it as a remote role, they can get access to more people. Conversely, people in London could get someone cheaper from the
absolutely.
southwest.
I was going to say absolutely, and I think that's it, isn't it? It really depends where they're based and what sort of people they're looking to employ and what roles they want them to fill. So when is the white paper being published? You said you're working on it at the moment.
Yeah, we're working on it at the moment. We want to get it out as soon as possible.
Heap the pressure on.
We want to get it out as soon as possible. So as soon as it's ready, I'll send you a link.
Awesome.
Yeah, and we'll update the show notes. So if people are listening to this further out, then we'll make sure that link goes in there as well. Yeah, it sounds interesting. I think it's. I think you said a little bit there, Zoe. It's getting that evidence behind some of our kind of thoughts on there and hearing where things are. To me, that resignation, that's an interesting one. I would have assumed that we'd see the same within the public sector as elsewhere. So to hear that's low, it's interesting on there, and it's good to put some facts and numbers around some of these things, which is again why we love the Work Lab site, to be able to put on these bits on there. So if anyone listening does have any other links to kind of similar sort of surveys, we'd love to sort of share those around as well and pick up.
Just on that, I don't know if any of you have looked at the Inspiration Library yet in Beaver Insights. I had a quick look. I wasn't overwhelmed, to be honest.
This I've seen a lot of questions about when can we edit it, when can we manage it, all of the sort of the usual I want different sources in there, but I know what you mean. It's snuck its way in, hasn't it? And
and once you've read the articles, it's like, right, I've read them now, so how often is this going to update? Is it actually going to be kept current? Is it and it's a bit cerebral as well, isn't it? The stuff in there, it's interesting to people like us who are interested in this topic, but actually, the bog standard user who's just doing their operational stuff that they need to run the business, they're not going to care. They're just going to be wanting to be told what's in it for me. How do I do this?
That's it. It should be not Viva Inside. It should be what's in it for me. If they called it that and targeted at the
make it smaller and snippetier, Al, your point about people like those little kind of snippets of how do I do this and tips on there, maybe bringing more of those into it. I need to be careful because I joined at the MVP Summit session about that, and they were talking about some of the things they're looking to do and some of the and they were trying to gather ideas, so I'm trying to make sure I don't slip anything out on there. But I think I think it's nice. I agree. I think there are some people who will love it. The majority of people will kind of go, not really interested in that. And I think unless it gets more targeted, that could then be more useful within that. I think that's fair to say. Zoe, anything you want to wrap up in terms of that before we?
No, I think we've gone through everything that I want to go through actually, but just thanks for having me on to talk about this. I think for me it's something I find fascinating. I think we're at a really interesting time where we can watch all of this unfold, and I'm not quite sure what it's going to look like in the next few years, but it's going to be interesting watching and seeing. I think
I'd love to see, because I think we've had a lot of change around meetings. I don't think much has changed around the way we track work and kind of tick off things as being done. And I think that I hope that one thing comes to that. I know we've talked about asynchronous work before on Grey Hat Beard, and I think I'd like to see more change there, if I'm honest. That seems to have been glossed over a lot.
I think that's what a lot of organisations, certainly that I'm speaking to, are now kind of going, well, okay, how do we measure? How do we define productivity?
Absolutely.
Is it activity or is it output? Is it OKRs? Is it ally.io? Is it, how do we define it? Because that way we can actually see whether we are, being productive or not regardless of time being spent.
It's how do you get the ROI for things that are intangible? How do you actually measure it?
Well, I can keep myself busy for an entire day, an entire week, an entire month, or even longer, and not outputting anything valuable.
Absolutely.
And that does not depend on where I work.
It's consultant life, isn't it?
I mean, just like I know from customers, just like people who know, so when working just like in the office, but I can't go home before 4 p.m. because my manager is watching me. So I'm doing something that doesn't really add value, but at least I'm here and I get paid by the hour. So
so that's another really interesting point that came out of that. How does this change to something that's more outcome based align with consulting, where you're charging for billable days?
That's an interesting challenge. Yeah, billable days gives you an absolute limit. But hey,
I don't know what you get within that, but yeah.
I don't work in the consulting space anymore, so I can leave that conversation well behind.
I stopped to charge by hours or days. I will estimate how long this will take me. Then I will just like factor in the pain that comes along with that client or with that project, and then just like tell people, hey, this will cost, I don't know how many years, but just like give them just like a price tag and then do the stuff. And that makes sure that we do not have unnecessary meetings. It makes sure that we do not need to do this bullshit here, bullshit there, reporting, just like filling in timesheets. No one wants to do that. No one wants to fill timesheets. It is not a good thing to do. It does not add value to anyone. No one reads this. Everyone just like invents something, just like because we all forget to do this. It's just like by the end of the week or the month, it's like, what did I do for this client? And then we just like make up something, and then someone will pretend to read this and approve this. It does not make any sense at all. And this is why I just like stopped doing that. I explained this to my customers, said, this is what it will cost, regardless if I need 100 days for it or 150 days for it. This is what this project will be costing. And we just define what I would do for that. We will not define what it will cost, and it turns out to be working great for me, at least, because I hate timesheets. Yes,
absolutely. Everybody,
I love them. Everybody hates timesheets. That's a universal truth.
See,
they're bad.
No, we love things, though we hate timesheets. Can we agree on that?
Yes.
Okay. That easy.
Absolutely. So I think, to me that would be the interesting thing to come and see if people crack that change, because that's a change the way people work. That's a change the behaviour that's going to be much bigger, and will take away a lot of the way people make a living. So as they just are present and talk a lot. So what we need is people who can kind of target it and get outcomes as well. But anyway, thank you. Off my soapbox. Thank you very much, Zoe. That was fantastic. So really enjoyed that. And if people want to look out for you, I think we mentioned the end of last show that there's the women teams and all the big conferences coming up. So do keep an eye out for that. And it's SharePoint _ Zoe, isn't it?
Yeah.
On Twitter as well to follow you. So perfect. Well, thank you very much. Thank you everyone for listening. If you enjoyed that, don't forget to hit subscribe and all the fun things like that. Do leave us a review. That's the other one I'm going to mention, because I haven't seen many reviews, but if you fancy leaving one, preferably a good one, that would be fantastic as well. Otherwise, we'll be back next week with the latest news and a nice new subject to discuss. But otherwise, see you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks for listening to Grey Hat Beard Podcast. The song Drink Up My Mateys was brought to you by Black Bones under a non-commercial attribution license.